Welcome to the Aviator Edge podcast. This is our first interview, and who better than Chris Collins, a former Marine, retired JetBlue Blue Angels pilot, and now a FedEx pilot. We're so excited to have him. And first off, Chris, we just want to thank you for your service to our country.
I appreciate that, and I'm happy to be here.
We're excited to have you. This is going to be an awesome day. We have so many questions. First, we just kind of want to get to know you a little bit. So can you tell us where you were born, kind of where you grew up and stuff?
Sure. I grew up in Darien, Connecticut. Born there, went through high school, and then when I graduated high school, my plan was to go into the Navy. I wanted to fly F-14s off the top of an aircraft carrier.
You knew from a young age, huh?
Well, ironically, I was on my way out to Phoenix in 1986 to visit my buddy who lived in Scottsdale for Thanksgiving. And on the way back, they played this new movie called Top Gun. and sure enough, I landed, and I was 12 at the time, 11 or 12. And I remember I got home and I told my parents, I'm like, I'm going to be a fighter pilot. And they were like, okay.
Sure.
And,
we all said that in 1986.
Yeah. And so I that defined my life. And at the age of 12, I started mowing lawns, and I made enough money every week to get about an hour of flight time in a 150. 152. And then my parents kind of realized, holy cow, you're serious about this. Yeah. And towards the end, they ended up helping me out financially. And I ended up flying my first solo on my 16th birthday.
Wow.
Which ironically was on a Saturday. So I couldn't get my driver's license till Monday. So my parents had to drive me to the airport so I could fly a plane by myself before I could actually legally drive a car by myself.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
And so after that, I wanted to apply to the Naval Academy, which I did. They didn't like my GPA, so they said no. And I applied to Norwich University, which is a private military school up in Vermont. And my plan was to go there for a year, reapply to the Naval Academy, and continue down that route. But while I was up at Norwich, I ended up meeting the Marine recruiter who was like, why don't you just come fly for the Marine Corps? And I was like, a lot of people don't understand the depth of Marine aviation.
Yeah.
That we have jets, we have helicopters, we have Marine squadrons on aircraft carriers that deploy with the Navy. And so it was a big learning experience for me, but signed on the dotted line, went to officer candidate school, and got commissioned as a second lieutenant, went to flight school, got jets, and then I ended up, ironically, being in a Marine squadron that deployed on aircraft carriers. So I did that twice in 2005 and never looked back.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of great friends that are in the Navy. Obviously, we'll get to the Blue Angels later, but I've spent a lot of time with the Navy. In the end, I was much happier being a Marine officer than a naval officer. I've got no regrets.
Now, did you train in Pensacola?
I did. Yeah.
A lot of folks trained down that area.
Everybody starts in Pensacola, at least for your initial ground training, and then you go to either Corpus Christi or you stay in Pensacola for your initial primary flight training. They now fly the T6. Then it was the T-34, and then after that initial primary flight training, you kind of decide, hey, do I want to fly jets, helicopters, or C-130?
Right.
Anybody with half a nut wants to fly jets.
Sure.
And, I put jets, but it's also up to the needs of the Marine Corps time. Mm-hmm. So, I did well enough. I got jets, and that kind of takes you down another path.
What did you fly in the Marines?
I flew F-18s.
Okay.
So you flew both Navy and Marines?
No. I was always a Marine.
Always a Marine?
Yeah. But when I was on the Blues, there's always one Marine representative on the Blue Angels.
I got confused. Okay.
I was wondering when you made that switch.
Yep.
So, Okay, so they still recruit a Marine pilot to fly at Blue Angels?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, this year it'll be next year for the 2025 season, they selected 2 Marines.
Oh, wow.
There hasn't been a Marine on the team in the last 2 years, but this year they selected 2 Marines, which is great.
Yeah.
Because it's a huge recruiting tool for both the Navy and the Marine Corps, and we want to have one of us there.
When I was young, all of the Marine Corps checks came with Department of U.S. Navy on the top, so it was always cool to see that. For
Understood. Little known fact, there's 2 departments. For the Department of the Navy, there's the male department and the female department. Mm-hmm. The Marine Corps is the male department.
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh,
nice. We're going to be slinging mud in a minute. I love it. A Semper Fi, baby. Always faith.
So how many aircraft carrier landings do you have?
I have 350 carrier landings. 200 of those are at night.
At night?
Yeah.
Wow.
And you're using a HUD, no doubt, for that approach.
Yes. At night, the reason most of them are at night is when I was over in Iraq, we were the night carrier for the whole shock and awe campaign and everything leading up to it. But yes, you use the HUD. We have an ILS that is much like a civilian ILS, except it's channelized. It works. They actually work on the same frequency. So channel 10 might be 111.15. It's going to be.
Oh, right.
I don't know what the exact frequency is, but channel 10 will work at some airfields in the U.S. In the Blue Angels, we actually had a traditional ILS, but also you have something that's called the ACL. It's the Automated Carrier Landing System. And what this is there's a tiny little beacon. It looks like about half a roll of quarters. It's a little beacon. It's right on the nose of the aircraft, or just below the nose of the aircraft. And the ship will actually lock up onto that beacon, and it'll send data link information to the aircraft that is more accurate than a regular ILS. So what we will typically do is when we first start an approach at night, you'll fly with them both up. And then as soon as you push over, because the ILS is mechanical, we'll go ahead and make sure that they both match. And then as soon as they both match, most guys will just turn off the ILS so that you're just left with the ACLS symbology in the heads-up display.
Okay.
Because there is a possibility for the aircraft carrier to lock on an aircraft behind you, but still feed you data link information. And so you want to make sure that they're matched up before you actually continue
So you're getting all the same. It's a redundancy.
Yeah, and if it's clear at night, once you get to about 3/4 of a mile, that's when we actually start flying the ball, which is it's a Pappy on steroids. And so we start flying the ball, but our minimums out on the carrier are 200.5. Often you'll fly below that because you got to get home, and that's where the LSOs on deck will assist you. If you're ever out on the carrier and the LSOs say taxi lights on, it's bad, because what they want to do is they want to be able to pick up your aircraft via taxi light in the clouds,
so they can see
in order to help make sure that you're on center line.
Ceilings,
because landing on center line is very important, because you do it, in the Hornet, you've got about probably 6 feet left or right of center line before you get over the foul line. You could actually start hitting another aircraft.
6 feet.
6 feet.
But bigger wing aircraft like the E2 and the C2, those guys have about a foot and a half.
Plenty of room.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so it's important to keep guys on center line, and then also the glide slope too.
Yeah. Wow. So your margin for error is so minimal. And do you have a criteria where there's a certain moment you got to go around, or are you going basically all the way until if you ever get off a little bit, you're going around?
You continue your approach until an LSO waves you off.
Okay.
I mean, even you can line up behind the boat. It's daytime, but the deck's pitching, and you can actually watch the carrier deck, doing this, and you want nothing to do with landing on that thing.
Yeah.
But the LSOs they're watching the deck pitch, the deck rate, and you don't want to land on the upswing because you can actually damage the jet, but you actually have to be in sync with the boat. And a lot of times you'll just get waved off just because you get out of sync. And the LSOs will feed you that information too, because you're nervous. You see the boat moving.
Oh yeah.
It'll get on your nerves. And I was also an LSO, so part of your job is you're part psychologist. Especially when guys are going around and around, and you're like, all right, man, just calm down.
Yeah.
We're gonna get you aboard. Just listen to what we got to say, and because everybody has their night in the barrel where you end up boltering or going around a bunch of times just because, and it's at some point, you do it once, you're like, okay, twice, all right, 3, 4 times, and that starts getting in your head.
Oh, yeah.
And, sometimes you just got to calm people down. And
yeah. Well, especially, too, if you obviously didn't start an aircraft carrier, so when you're using a regular runway that's long enough, you're rarely going around. So it's something, especially pilots are prideful, and so we don't want to have to go around, because it's almost like, I know wind conditions, everything can change, but a lot of times we feel like, it shows that we're not good enough to handle the current conditions, And so that for sure would play a major factor, going around twice and then 3 times.
It's funny you say that, because I think I agree with you 100%. When I was young, flying, I was like, man, you get it. Well, especially if you're flying a Cherokee and you got a 8,000-foot runway, you can do 4 touch and goes on there. But in the 121 world, it's the thinking about go arounds is completely different than it was 15, 20 years ago. If I do a go around at FedEx, they don't even want to know about it. There's no reports. They don't care if you spend an extra 5,000 pounds of gas, which is about what it takes to go around in the MD-11. But they just want, you to be safe. Yeah. Go arounds are free. Yeah. Accidents aren't.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what. So, is there any truth? And I grew up. My dad was Navy, 30 years in the Navy, so I got a chance to get on some of those floating cities and spend some time on aircraft carriers, which are amazing. If you've never been on one, and most people haven't, don't get confused. It's not like a charter boat where it's super up and down. It takes a lot of ocean movement to move a aircraft carrier, because they call them floating cities, because underneath there's shopping, your haircut, everything is a regular city functioning underneath. So is there any truth to the saying, anyone can land a plane, but it takes a real pilot to land one on a moving target?
It's difficult.
I bet.
Before you go out to the aircraft carrier first time, you do about 100 touch and goes at a local field with an LSO on the radio with you. And out at that field, we have the same Fresnel lens that is on the aircraft carrier, the ball. There's an exact replica. And oh, by the way, the aircraft carrier landing zone is painted on the runway. So we can work on lineup. And then what we do is, if you're going out to do one of these field sessions, the LSO actually has it's funny, it's a mirror on a pole, and we will go and make sure that that ball is set for 3 degrees. Out on the aircraft carrier, it's actually set for 3 1/4 degrees, but the relative glide slope remains at 3 degrees, because the aircraft's actually the carrier's moving away from you, or there's enough wind to give you a relative glide slope of 3 degrees.
3 degrees. Okay.
How fast, with the aircraft carrier going and with the headwind generally they're trying to give you, is there a preset? How fast are you coming in to land on that aircraft carrier?
It all depends on the weight of the aircraft carrier or of the aircraft. In the F-18, we flew at 8.1 degrees angle of attack.
Okay.
And what that does is it puts the hook in the right. It actually puts the hook on a 3 degree glide slope.
Okay.
Every aircraft has a different, what we call hook to eye height.
Okay.
So at 8.1 degrees, and I forget what it was in the F-18, the difference between the pilot's eye and the hook, let's call it 16 feet. All right. Now, if I'm on center line, the ball will be at 3 1/4 degrees, give me that relative glide slope of 3 degrees. Take something like the F-14, it's a much longer aircraft. Yeah. That hooked eye is going to be about 20 feet. So if they flew the same approach that I did, that's 3 1/4 degrees, with the same F-18 setting, the F-14 would actually touch down a lot earlier on the aircraft carrier.
Right.
Now, what we do to change that is, so the ball shoots out. Sorry, let me put this down.
Oh, yeah.
Listen, America flies on Duncan. We're glad you brought
it
in. Yeah.
So the ball, the aircraft's coming in like this, the ball puts out a light plane, and we're going to keep it even. And this is another reason why it's very important to be on center line.
Okay.
So with the F-14, which we don't fly anymore, but just as an example, because that pilot eye, that hooked eye is much larger, what we actually do is we actually tilt the ball. So it's still a 3-degree glide slope, but apparent for the F-14 pilot, his head is actually flying a little bit higher, about 4 feet higher than an F-18 pilot. So if he goes left of center line, he's actually going to be low on glide slope. If he's right of center line, he's actually going to be higher on glide slope. So it's another reason that we want to keep the pilots right on center line.
So it is very important for young pilots. We talk about this in the flight schools all the time. Landing on center line. If you ever want to fly F-16s but we got to land on center line.
Yep.
There's no missing. And you said a foot to a foot and a half for some of those planes. That's our only margin for error?
Yeah.
That's insanity times 6. That's crazy.
Yeah, and if you get way outside those parameters, the LSOs are just going to wave you off.
Yeah. And at what point after touching down, did you ever have any missed hooks where you touched down and it didn't catch?
Yeah, everybody does. I mean, you'll miss it for one of two reasons. One of three. One, your hook's up. Mm-hmm. 2, you land past the 3 or 4 wire, depending on which aircraft carrier you're on. And then the other thing that does happen is it's what's called a hook skip. Where you just come down. You're coming down at 700-800 foot per minute with no flare, and sometimes the hook will just hit the carrier and it'll just jump over the wire.
700-800 feet a minute, no flare.
No flare.
Because I visualized a minute ago. I was like, I could land on that table, but there's no flare.
Down.
No flare.
I may not have the guts for this because they call me go around bud anyway because they know I'm going around. Last time was 2 times for me and you on the arrow. It was breezy. I'm go around bud. Yep. But so you can't afford to get that nickname. They put that on your helmet and you got to wear that that's not good right there, like a scarlet letter.
At what point on the runway of the aircraft carrier do you know that you didn't get a good hook and you're going to now go around?
It's kind of hard to explain. So as soon as you touch down, you go full power. One of two things is going to happen. You're going to go flying again, or you're going to stop.
I get that. I didn't think about that because you have to be ready because the end comes fast.
You go full power no matter what.
Yep.
And it'll stop you if you're good, but if not, you're now. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, and getting airborne again it's not a big deal. I mean, you've got the relative wind. It's all you just power up and you're airborne again.
You got all the power you need. And another thing you don't think about aircraft carriers if you've never studied them, they're way off the ground. I mean, they're way off the water
60
rather.
Feet.
Yeah, it's not. It's so 6 stories.
Yep.
Off the water, and you don't think about that. I think when you just think about aircraft carriers, 6 stories a long way. Not as long as you need it to be, but I mean it's 60 feet. It's not like landing on a bay
Well,
line.
and that's a lot of new guys want to, even on a nice day, and you see it more at night. You're coming out over the water, and the water is 60 feet lower than the aircraft carrier, and a lot of times guys, as soon as they get right over the edge, they get deck rush. And they'll go ahead and add just a little bit power, and that's just you go up an 1 foot, and you were on glide slope, you're going to miss all the wires.
Missed it. Okay.
Yeah,
I got you.
So
the margin for error is absurd with this.
It is, and that's why even before you go out for your first time, you do so much practice on land to make sure that when you do get out there, you are prepared. Because the first time you go out to the aircraft carrier, you do it solo. There's nobody in your back seat. And you line up behind the boat and you're nervous, it's scary. And then the first time you land, you're waiting for Jesus to come out and shake your hand. Instead you got this yellow shirt over there that's trying to get you out of the landing area because another
another one's good.
It's like going to Oshkosh. Get out of the way. Get out of the way.
That's fascinating.
That's cool.
When it's visual conditions outside, are you still shooting via ALS?
Not the ACLS, but we'll have the ILS up.
Okay.
From what I understand, the Navy is changing the way they're doing the recoveries. But when I did it, it was every squadron was stacked above the aircraft carrier. And we do what's called cyclic operations in the U.S. Navy. We're the only country that does this. And what we do is, the first go of the day, let's say we launch 15 aircraft.
Okay.
The cycles are between 45 minutes to an hour and a half, meaning 45 minutes to an hour and a half before the next launch goes out.
Yeah.
Well, half hour prior to launch, all the aircraft start up, and as soon as they're ready, they start taxiing up to the catapults, and you could set your watch to the first cat launch. The shooters will try and make the thud right at the end of the aircraft, right at the end of the aircraft carrier on the minute that the launch is supposed to go. So the other aircraft, 15 aircraft, are just circling above. There's no tower. You're not talking. Well, there is a tower, but nobody's directing the traffic. Right. So as soon as the last aircraft goes off, the first aircraft in the stack should be in the coming in for the overhead. And typically, if you time it right, they want to close down the landing area, and the aircraft is in the groove. And you'll have guys just running out of the landing area with a guy about 15 seconds out. Wow. And it's all done just visually. And guys screw it up, but towards mid, even late in the beginning of the cruise, guys just get good at it.
Yeah. And
if it's clear out, you can launch 15 aircraft and recover 15 aircraft without anybody saying a word. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times you don't want to talk on the radio because that's how the Chinese track you.
I was going to say your position's given up at that point. Yep. We can triangulate from there.
Now, honestly, an aircraft carrier, no matter what's going to emit a lot of energy. It'll
be hard to find.
It's not that hard to find them. But we do try and practice that discipline.
So side note, but kind of interesting on this, as I was watching the Olympics, which was just recently, they talked about how you watch them dive and do all those crazy turns and all the things they're doing. You wonder, how do they train for that? And they show some behind-the-scenes stuff with that, like to learn on the pommel horse, their feet are in a bucket and the bucket's going in a circle. So you learn all that stuff, and I always wonder how they train. That was what you were saying. A lot of stuff's done on land because the thought of those planes, when I see them flying at, a foot or two apart, in my mind, I'm like, there's no way we started there. We had to get there. There's a lot of training had to go somehow before we put somebody in a multi-million-dollar machine and said, no, really, just turn it upside down. The other one will be fine. Just fly with it. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
I've had some costly training, a lot of time put in. How long does it take? I don't even know how to ballpark that. How long does it take from I am a GA pilot to I'm ready to land on an aircraft? How many years are we talking?
Well, you got to remember, a lot of pilots that go into the Navy, the Marine Corps, even the Air Force, there's guys that start pilot training that have never been in an airplane or flown an airplane.
Right.
And so I'll use the Marine Corps. If you're going jets, you can go from never have flown an airplane in your life to you will solo inside of 2 weeks in a T6, which is something that's got 1,200 horsepower. Full glass cockpit and an ejection seat. You'll solo that from never been in an airplane before in 2 weeks.
Wow. And that's an accelerated course.
I'm 12 weeks on a GA course. 10 to 12 weeks, I'll put you up in a Cherokee.
Yeah.
It's like close to 1,200 horsepower.
But it's a different mentality of training. Your guys are paying you. Right. Whereas, the Marine Corps is paying me.
Sure.
And you're going to do it the way the Marine Corps or the Navy or the Air Force wants you to do it. And there's a lot of ground training, and there's a lot of gouge. We know guys, much like here, that have done it a week or two prior, so you can go talk to them, hey, what can I expect? And they'll tell you, and that knowledge gets passed down.
That's how it works here too.
We all got gouges. But we also do a lot more simulator training, just for procedures.
Right.
So when you get in the airplane, although you've never been there before, you know where all the switches are. You kind of know what to expect. And most of the flights are probably 1.5 to 2 hours, in that initial training for your familiarization flights, and then subsequently in the aerobatics and formation and things like that. But it's, I was a CFI. I mostly used it to do BFRs. But it's military aviation and general aviation. They're just two different ways of thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a different pushing mechanism.
But
yeah.
And
You're right. They pay us, and we work at their pace. And in this case, they're paying you, and you're going to work at this pace, or you're going to wash out.
Yes.
This is not for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
When you're flying the F-18, did you have? Do you need special permission to break the speed of sound, or were you able to do it, or what were the?
Not necessarily permission, but you do need to be in certain designated areas in order to do it. You know, because the consequence is you can break windows.
Uh-huh.
And I had a buddy in, was it Ajo, Arizona? Is Ajo in Arizona or New Mexico?
Ajo doesn't. I don't know.
Anyway, wherever Ajo is, he ended up breaking about 400 windows in that town.
My goodness!
Oh my!
And how high up was he?
Well, it's not necessarily how far up he was. He was running away from an F-16, going downhill. The F-16 was chasing him, and he pulled up to level off. And the way supersonic airflow and the shock wave works, it's perpendicular to the aircraft. So if you've got, the aircraft's going down like this, he's supersonic. As you pull up, that shock wave goes perpendicular to your aircraft.
Right.
Okay. So even though you may be doing 1.1, 1.2, that shock wave can be doing Mach 2, and that's how you can end up breaking a lot of windows.
Wow.
That gets you a talking to.
Do you besides obviously your airspeed indicator showing that you're at Mach, do you notice any differences?
No.
It's all the same.
We take a Cherokee, go down 50 feet over the desert, you're going to feel faster than you do going Mach 2. Now, in the blues, when you do, the 5 pilot does a sneak pass, he's doing it about 0.98, 0.99 at 50 feet. That's fast.
Man.
Hey, is there any possibility you'll be taking a Cherokee? If you want, I have one. You want to just jump at? I'll ride. I want to take a ride. Your controls. I mean, it sounds like good times to me, man. Fun time.
Yeah. Well, that's nice thing about out here. You can go down low, and it's not a big deal out here. But
things we don't tell students in flight school is not really a good plan.
Well, if you want a good story, this comes out every now and again, but. It was, so I told you I flew my solo on my 16th birthday.
Okay.
Well, it was May 10th, 1991. And, growing up in Connecticut, in May, you start to get those nice days every now and again. And May 10th just happened to be one of those days where it was just, the weather was perfect. It was the first time, in a free period, everybody's hanging outside in the field, and it's just gorgeous. And I didn't want to be in school. So I had a girlfriend of mine write me a note saying that I was going to a funeral. And so I took that at the front desk, so they give me a pass so that I could get my car out of the parking lot. Well, I had my solo license at the time, so I went out and I rented a 152, and was going out. I was doing touch and goes, practicing stalls, all the maneuvers you do as getting ready to be a private pilot. Mm-hmm. Well, my high school happened to be, it was probably about 15 miles to the west of the airport. And so I went over and I flew over the high school, and I'm at 1,000 feet, right? Yeah. But then I see all my friends out on the field. So I take my little 152, and I'm at 500 feet. I fly over to school not once, but 3 times. And again, I'm in a 152 at 500 feet, full throttle doing 90 knots. Yeah. And I go back and I land. And then it's the next day in my Spanish class that somebody knocks on the door, open up, 2 police officers remove me from my Spanish class.
No
and
way.
I go up to the principal's office, and they're like, "Did you fly over the school yesterday?" And I was 16. I'm 2 cops staring at me. I was like, "Uh-huh."
Sure.
The proper answer was, I want to see a lawyer.
Yeah.
But as a result of that, I ended up getting suspended from school for 3 days, grounded by 30 days from my parents, lost my student license for 90 days.
Wow.
And I didn't know there's judges. There's FAA judges.
Yeah. Oh, they're paying attention for sure.
Yeah.
I'd like to say it slowed you down, but you still got your
so then the irony is, when I was on the blues, I'm flying around at 50 feet doing 500 knots, and it's legal.
Yeah.
And they're encouraging you to go faster.
Yeah.
You should go faster. Close to the high school.
Yeah.
Oh, Blues can do anything.
That's very cool.
So I do want to talk about the Blue Angels because I think this is the most fascinating thing. And there was a documentary that just came out. Did you ever see that?
I did. I thought they did a fantastic job kind of depicting what we do.
Yeah, I loved actually how they just showed the daily schedule and how grueling it is.
Yep.
Real quick, how did you transition then from the Marines to the Blue Angels? Is that something that you get recommended for because you haven't gone around in a long time?
So what it is, the Blue Angels, there's an application process, and you have to have a minimum amount of hours to even apply for the Blues. And what the Blue Angels are looking for is about 1,250 tactical jet hours.
Okay.
Because most people with that amount of hours can do what the Blue Angels do with the amount of training that we give to them. And so I was an F-18 instructor in Miramar in San Diego, and I finally had enough hours. The message came out, said, hey, the Blue Angels are looking for applicants for the 2000. At this point, it was the 2007 show season that I was applying for. Is that right? 2007 or 2006. And so I went ahead and applied. Now, you have to remember, like, as a regular fleet aviator, when you see the Blue Angels, you're like, tight blue suits, these guys are flying formation. How hard can it be? That's the average fleet pilot, what we think of the Blue Angels. You're like, it's cool, but how hard can it be? So I applied, and when you apply, you put in an application, and then you want to go to 2 to 3 air shows, or 3 to 4 air shows, and you're going on your own dime, unless you can take an F-18 to wherever the air show is. And when you're there, you go to the briefs with the team to kind of get an idea of how they operate. And then you are also invited to all the social events that the Blue Angels go to. There's some exceptions, but generally you're going out with a team at night. And really what the team's looking to do is they're looking to get to know you.
Right.
I know you have enough hours to do what I do. Now I need to find the person that I can trust, get along with. We're on the road over 320 days of the year. And even when we're at home, we're still golfing with each other. We're still going to each other's houses for dinner. So you need to have somebody that you can trust and that, quite frankly, you like.
Right.
And so when we go out, we look for guys. You go out to the bars, you're drinking with them, just getting to know their personalities. And we want to get to know you. Every now and again, you get guys, they'll just go order a tonic, with a lime in it to make you think that they're drinking, vodka soda. I'm like, no, man, I want you to have the vodka soda because I want to know what you're like after a few drinks with you. And you'd be surprised. A lot of guys, some guys will go off script and just say some stuff that you go, well, you're never going to be on the team.
Yeah.
Right. But that's good. We want to know that. Or they'll say something to a team member's wife. Now, the wives don't have any input, but you say something to my wife, she's going to tell me about it, and it's going to have an effect on how we proceed from there. So every year you get about 40 applicants, and it's around the first week in June that we'll pick the finalists. And so we'll whittle, and every year we pick 2 or 3 pilots, because the year that there's a new boss, that's a whole separate selection process. Yeah. So the year that there's a new boss, they only pick 2. Every other year, they'll pick 3 demo pilots. And so we whittle that 40 down to maybe a group of 5 to 8. And then we bring them down to Pensacola for a week long of it's interviews, social events. The pilots have to do a strength test that everybody fails. And
push-ups, pull-ups.
No, it's
benching 225.
well, and I'll get to that. Remind me to talk about it later, but some of the modifications that we have on our jets. And then at the end of that, you go home and you've got a 5-minute window to call in. And so you're sitting there with every GPS hack you've got, and you're like, 3, 2, 1. And then for the finalists, you call into the boss. And the boss will answer. You're like, hey, sir, it's Chris. And, my first year that I applied, he's like, hey, Kitty. Kitty's my call sign, by the way. He's like, hey, Kitty, we appreciate you coming out. Unfortunately, we can, select you for the team this year, blah, blah, blah. We'd like you to come out and try next year. Well, the next year, because they only take a Marine every other year, I knew I wouldn't make the team the next year. I still put in an application just for continuity. And then it was my third year when I actually made the team. And that phone call is kind of funny because, you know, you get on there, and it was a different boss at this time because it was 2 years later. And, you know, he's like, hey, Kitty, you know, appreciate you coming out this year. You know, there's a lot of tough competition, blah, blah. And he's dragging this thing on for a couple minutes, which I know historically it's a better sign than, you know, ripping the Band-Aid off right about it. And he's just going on, and I'm like, oh, my God, you know. And ironically, in the background, she wasn't my wife, my fiance at the time. We were on our way to a wedding, and our ride is sitting right outside. You know, we're late. And so I'm like, all right, let's go.
Get it going.
And finally, if you do make the team, everybody, all the officers are in the room with the boss. And then next thing, you know, everybody's like, welcome to the team, asshole. And, you know, it's pretty cool. And you're like, holy cow. And then he's like, all right, just go enjoy, have a good day. And so then my wife, or fiance at the time, she goes, did you make it? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, holy cow. She goes, I'll be right back. So she runs upstairs, and then she comes down with a shirt that says, my boyfriend's a Blue Angel pilot. And I was like, what were you going to do if I didn't make? She's like, I was just going to throw it out.
Save it till next year. Save it till the other year, because every other year.
Yeah, it was pretty funny.
That's awesome.
So you found time to train in Miramar, which is interesting because when I watched Top Gun, I thought all y'all did was play volleyball. So that's weird.
100%, yeah.
Yeah, I figured you got a lot of and once you get to Pensacola, you got a lot of volleyball time.
Yeah, no. And so the off year when I didn't make the team, that year that I couldn't apply, well, I applied, but they weren't going to take somebody. I actually went to the Top Gun school, and very disappointed that there was no volleyball, no singing to the chicks in bars, and no motorcycle riding.
I was going to say, did you at least have a ninja?
Nope.
Nothing? Okay.
No.
All right.
Got an R1, but
did you really? Okay. All right. Did you really go to flight school if you don't have a motor? I mean, I bought one when I went to flight school.
Yeah.
Just to have one because Tom had one. I mean,
yeah, I didn't have my first motorcycle until I finally got out to Miramar because my parents, that was a hard no with them.
You still ride?
No, because when I got on the Blues, I sold my motorcycles. The Blue Angels don't want you to do anything that's going to potentially injure yourself.
Safety first.
So they don't want you skiing. They don't want you motorcycle riding because there's no backups. You know, there's 6 pilots, and, you know, you get injured, you can't fly. That's it.
Yeah.
Right. You don't take those chances.
Yep.
Yeah. And you guys spend months training, and then you go on a tour, right? 320 days. You're traveling all across the States.
Yeah. So when you join the team in it's typically Labor Day weekend.
Okay.
And you arrive that weekend, and here's a funny story. So when you go down as a finalist, you get measured for your flight suits. And this guy comes in, he's taking measurements of everywhere. and so when you arrive in Pensacola, they go, hey, your flight suits are ready. So you get the address. And remember, this is in 2008 when I joined the team. So, yeah, there were maps, but, you know, you still used, you're like, all right, where's the address? So I pull up to this place, and I'm like, there's no way. Like, I've been a new guy in the squadron before. And sure enough, I look in the back, and there's some Blue Angel flight suits in this store. But the name of the store is called Feminine Flair.
Is it now?
Feminine Flair at the time made 3 things: ladies swimsuits, ladies lingerie, and Blue Angel flight suits. And
incredible.
Yeah,
surprisingly, what they have in common, isn't it?
Yeah. So I go and I pick it up, and yeah, it was.
That's got to be a special moment for you, picking up.
It was pretty cool. And then the first time you put it on is pretty neat.
Yeah.
That would explain the feminine flair tattoo you have. I wondered.
Right?
About that.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. That's a good look.
But yeah, you put it on, and you're only allowed to wear your flight suit when you're actually flying the jet until you actually become a team member.
Okay.
Because at this point, you don't know what number you're going to be
Right.
in the demonstration. But they would allow us to fly jets. We would bring extra jets on the road when the newbies were traveling, or we'd go out and do a maintenance flight.
Just bring extra jets, just a lot of extra jets. Everybody should have an extra jet.
Yeah,
That's
we
what I say.
usually, bring 2 extra jets when we had the newbies, because you got to keep us proficient.
Sure,
you know,
absolutely.
You can't just not fly and then get right into training. So they did a pretty good job. But as soon as you landed, you went straight to the locker room and changed back into our, khaki uniform or the Marine Corps equivalent.
Right. So let me ask you a really crazy question about flying.
Yeah.
Did you ever see a UFO? I mean, the important stuff. I like to get to the important stuff.
So 20 years in the Marine Corps, I never saw a UFO.
Not one?
Not one. I never saw a weird thing. Being at FedEx for 7.5 years, I've seen more weird lights at 3 o'clock in the morning than anywhere else.
I blame Memphis for that, though. That could be.
Well, I was mentioning to you earlier, flying Memphis to Newark, way up north, and at a very high altitude. I mean, for a week straight when I did this route, saw the same 3 lights just rotating, disappearing, rotating, disappearing.
So interesting.
And again, I've seen satellites, I've seen Starlink. I know what all those things look like, and I can't explain. It was one of these things. I'm talking. I'm like, hey, you seeing what I'm seeing? And they're like, yeah. And you'd be surprised at 3 o'clock in the morning. We always fly with, the ATC frequency up on one radio, and then guard on another radio. And every now and again, somebody's like, anybody else see that? And then all of a sudden it goes, yeah, man, I saw that. I just want to make sure.
Just want to make sure I wasn't the only one.
Yeah.
So what you're telling me is, let me make sure I'm right on this. You went from the Blue Angels, where we're flying planes upside down within a couple feet of each other. Are you telling me now that when I order something from FedEx, it's been through a couple of barrel rolls, maybe one loop-de-loop before it lands in Newark? Is that what you're telling me?
100%.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. I didn't want to. So you're telling me you retire from the Blue Angels to go to FedEx?
No, I never wanted to fly for an airline.
Okay.
Through the Blues, I had met. You meet a lot of different people on the Blues, opportunities that Chris Collins would never get, but Blue Angel 4 had the opportunity. And through that, I wanted to go work for an equity firm up in the Bay Area, and I was kind of heading down that route when a buddy of mine that's at FedEx, he was a former F-18 guy, we're in the same squadron, and he goes, you don't work hard, pays a lot of money, and it's easy. And I went,
sign me up. Sign me up. That's what I
and
thought.
so I was like, I'm going to apply to one airline. We'll see what happens. And I applied to FedEx, got accepted, and I've never looked back. I have no regrets.
Now, you were telling me earlier, we were talking earlier before we got going here, that a lot of your mates will also work for FedEx in retirement years. Did you tell me the Thunderbirds, they'll go to UPS?
Weirdly enough, that's the way it seems to have worked out. There's a lot of Blue Angels, a lot of former Blue Angels at FedEx, and then apparently a lot of ex-Thunderbirds over at UPS.
That is crazy to think that these people are so skilled that they're flying packages. I want to fly freight and not humans because freight doesn't complain. You never get no complaints out of no freight.
Mm-hmm. Every now and again, you do have an animal in the back that starts acting up.
Okay, noted.
We ship a lot of horses and zoo animals and things like that.
Wow.
Did you say horses?
Yeah.
Did you now don't look like I'm a fool. Did you know that horses were flying on planes?
I didn't know they were doing that very often.
I didn't know that.
No, we at FedEx specifically on the MD-11, we fly a ton of horses.
Wow.
Really?
I didn't know those things.
People
were
that have a
shipped
lot of money.
around.
You got to take apples back there for them and whatnot. Man, that's all right.
We have specially designed crates for them, and most of the horses that we do fly are frequent flyers, and they're pretty good. We do have a vet that travels with us in case something goes wrong and they do need to put the horse down.
Sure.
Oh wow.
They come with a bag of drugs, and actually, as soon as the vet tech comes on board, they have to surrender all the drugs to the captain of the airplane. So I keep them up front with me until, in case something happens.
They say they need some, yeah.
Yeah. And most of these vet techs, they are, a lot of them have more hours on the MD-11 than most of our pilots.
Wow.
These are the same guys. So you'll see the same, probably 10 to 15 guys that just, they know the process. And I mean, it's it's pretty flawless with those guys.
It's got to be cool to be a horse with frequent flyer miles. I mean,
Right.
that's cool. That's a
Yeah.
You don't hear that a lot in your horsedom. I mean, are they called horsedoms? I don't know what they're
I
called.
don't know, King, yeah.
I don't know a lot about horses.
So, with the Blue Angels, I have a few questions I do want to ask
Yeah.
because this documentary, I loved it. There were just a couple of things that they didn't say that I do wish that I got cleared up. So, they said that you guys will fly in formation up to 18 inches within each other. Is that right? Or just as you get more comfortable with each other, you get closer and closer. But is there ever a limit to that point?
No, and we quite often you actually will fly even closer than that.
Okay.
The 3 pilot is typically the person that gets the closest to another aircraft.
Okay.
And that's in our first parade pass. We call it the Diamond 360. And the wingtips between the 2 and 3 jet are typically about 18 inches apart. I mean, I've seen as close as, 2 inches, on a nice smooth day. And as the 4 pilot, my responsibility is to make sure that they don't hit each other. And as long as they are flying close to each other and not trending inboard, I'm probably not going to say anything.
Mm-hmm.
If they start trending inboard, all I'll say over the radio is I'll say, little spread it. And when the 2 and the 3 pilot know that, they know they both need to just move it out just a little bit.
Okay.
We're talking inches.
Yeah, and the 3 pilot will typically park his head or her head about 8 inches underneath the boss's wing in that particular maneuver.
Now, when you're getting
8
that close,
inches.
are you creating a low pressure system that then is something else you need to now
No,
be aware of?
so I know what you're getting at, but no, in the Diamond, you're not pushing anybody around.
Okay.
And one of the reasons, and I'll kind of talk about some of the modifications that we do to the Blue Angels jets. One, we have a smoke system. We take out the 20 millimeter cannon up front, and they put in a 50-gallon smoke system drum.
Wow.
Okay.
But the big one that allows us to fly as close as we do is we put a 40-pound spring onto the stick. So if you can imagine just driving your car down the road and, there's just that little bit of play in the steering wheel.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that 40-pound spring takes out that little play in the steering
there's
wheel,
always,
but it's in the stick.
Yeah.
And so in order to just fly straight and level, you're constantly flying with 40 pounds of backstick pressure, which you start off with a 10-pound spring, we go to a 20, then a 30. My first 45-minute flight with a 10-pound spring, I thought, you picked the wrong guy.
Yeah.
Because I'm apparently weak.
Right.
And how the hell are we ever going to get to a 40-pound spring?
Hence the training exercise that you
Yeah,
failed.
right.
Yeah.
When I was on the Blues, my right forearm was twice the size of my left forearm.
Wow, that's cool.
And so the other thing we do is when we fly, we put the rudder pedals all the way back, the seats all the way down. And so my arm is actually resting right here, creating a fulcrum. And so I'm going to put my foot right here. So I've just got very tiny little control over the stick. And that's what allows us to really fly as close as we do. The Thunderbirds don't fly as close, and it's not because their pilots are good. It's more has to do with their ability to control the F-16. The F-16, the stick only moves 1/8 of an inch in every direction. Now, they will fly with nose down trim to try and get some of that artificial feel, but they just can't replicate it like we can with the 40-pound spring.
Wow. That's incredible.
And so
Insane.
I forget where I was going with that. But so that's one of the mods, but that's okay, back to your point about the pressure. We can fly that close and control the aircraft that close. Now, that maneuver, when I fly upside down, if I go, because the other 2 aircraft are far apart, if I get close to the boss's aircraft moving farther forward, I actually push him down into the ground. And so we're starting that maneuver at 100 feet. So as he feels me getting forward on his aircraft, he actually pushes back into me to maintain level flight. But also, if I end up screwing up going right or left, I can push his jet around left or right.
Are we training in simulators for this?
Nope.
Of course we're not.
No.
Why would we?
And are you looking at your gauges at all, or is this all you're seeing it in like your boss, for example, he's putting that pressure back up into you just by seeing it, or is he looking at his VSI at all? Or?
He's watching watching the heads-up display, and he can see when the nose.
Oh, right, you're all flying under the HUD.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
But no, so that one particular maneuver where I'm flying upside down with the boss, it's very tough because there's no other than don't hit the aircraft, there's no visual checkpoints for me to really go off of. When we're flying in the regular diamond formation, every piece of paint on the F-18 is functional in order to keep the other aircraft in position. If you remember the documentary, they're talking about flying the Y underneath the wing, or, all these other things. Yep. But all the paint is functional, and it's important when they come out in the paint shop that all the jets are actually the same. My second year on the team, we realized that this stupid little Hornet on 3 of the jets, on Boss's jet, from side to side, were off by about a foot. Oh, and I couldn't understand why the 2 wingmen, because they're swearing that they're flying in the exact position. And I'm like, and then we went out there one day, I'm like, okay, well, here's the problem. And so we were actually getting some newer jets coming out of the paint shop, and we had to call them and be like, hey, guys, it's really important. Like, if you're going to screw it up the same on both sides, because then we can adjust. We can adjust from there. But when you have these Hornets that are in 2 different directions, it's hard.
Yeah, that's not a place to have a bad day in two ways. One, if you're painting, because everything is vital, and the other thing is we can't afford a bad day at the office. Yeah. I mean, on either one of those levels. So it has to be. I mean, perfection is the key. And in aviation, I always teach students that perfection's not the rule. We're trying to get there. We're always chasing that.
Yeah.
But in your case, perfection is the expectation on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of the other things on the jets, all the numbers. Like if we have spare jets. If my jet breaks or whatever, and I have to hop in the spare jet, all the numbers on the jets and our names are all stickers, so that the maintainers can at any time turn the 7 jet into a 4 jet.
Okay.
Right.
And take the narrator's name off of his jet and put my name right up there.
Wow. That's fascinating.
That is
now,
unbelievable.
you spoke to it earlier saying in clear air you'll get closer to each other. Is turbulence ever a factor, or is it because you're flying in the same kind of air system you never have turbulence that'll bump one plane into the other?
Turbulence is a factor, and probably the worst place you could fly is Phoenix in the afternoon when it's windy and it's hot.
Yeah.
Especially if you are flying in areas that might be desert, going over a road, and then potentially over a cornfield.
Right.
And what you're going to do is you're going to get uneven heating over all those different surfaces. And it's my prerogative at any time to back off the sets. If we're just getting our butts kicked with turbulence, I'll just tell all the jets, the Diamond, and then even when we get into the 6-plane, hey, we're bumping it out to this set, which is just a little bit farther apart.
Which we're still talking maybe 2-3 feet from each other?
It depends. Yeah, I mean,
which is still so absurdly close, but because your margin for error is
and by that time, 3 feet is, that's a mile away, and you're very comfortable doing it. But yeah, we can back it up. Some of the best shows are when we're doing remote shows flying over the water, because as soon as you get over the water, it's even heating, and it's super smooth.
And the air's not rising, the air is fast.
Yeah.
Man. Now training is actually good out here in the desert, but maybe not when you're 6 inches apart. So that's how we know.
Yep.
No?
Yeah.
Old turbulence not your friend when you're that close, I don't guess.
Generally, if there is turbulence, as long as everybody's just kind of locked out their arm, all the jets are moving. They're all bumping at the same pace.
Right.
If somebody gets rocked, everybody's getting rocked.
Right.
So that's why we tell guys when it is bumpy, like, hey, lock out your arm. Don't react to the bumps, because if you do, everybody's going to get out of sync. But everybody's locking it out, not reacting. The jets are going to do the exact same thing.
Because you're so that is amazing. Now let me ask you this: from an age standpoint, I'm saying I'm a GA pilot. I come out of high school. I get my, like you said. What's that prime? There's got to be an age range in that blue, or am I crazy? I mean, for optimum brain efficiency, there has to be a window. What is, or is there not?
Your average Blue Angel pilot's about 33 years old.
Okay.
You know, you're in the 10 to 12 year mark in your career when you get picked up for the Blues.
Okay.
The boss is typically, in order to be the boss of the Blue Angels, you have to have been a prior F-18 commanding officer. So their minimum requirement is 3,000 hours, where the wingmen's are 1,250.
Okay.
So your boss is typically 6 years older.
So 33 is close to 40 then.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. That is impressive. So you can get there between. So you're capitalizing on the amount of experience that we have, enough experience to get you in, but you're still in that window because once you get past a certain, your reaction times will slow down, and you find all of that stuff. At least I find when I'm playing video games. I don't know if it's the same.
Well, you know, it's funny. I mean, I would say the peak at a naval aviator's career is probably in that mid-30s. You know, it's when you're the most technically proficient flying the F-18. As you get older, you can still maintain that, but you have other distractions of being a commanding officer, being an executive officer. And it's when we rely on a lot of the young guys to learn the material, you know, be our subject matter experts on, you know, a missile system or a radar system so that they can go ahead and give us lectures and keep everybody else up to speed. You know, and as a lieutenant colonel, you know, if I've got a question, I go to the young guy. I'm like, tell me again how this thing works.
Sure.
But my ability to grab that information based on my experience is a lot quicker than a young guy.
Absolutely.
You know, I could be told once, hey, here's the timeline, here's where we're going to execute, and I go, okay, that makes sense. I can do that.
You can see it.
Yeah.
You can visualize everything.
Relearning information you've forgotten is so much easier because it's slightly familiar with you. And
Yeah.
So the take-home message that I got from today is the next time you order something and it's being delivered, you can bet that FedEx and or UPS with the Thunderbirds are flying in formation. The FedEx flight formation's much tighter, of course. And when you bring that in, they do barrel rolls. That's why sometimes your packages are a little upside down when you give them a box because they've been shifted during flight.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the people that fly at FedEx are really good at flying. Really good at flying. That's insanity. I didn't realize. I wondered where you go afterwards. And I never thought that you'd be delivering packages and such. And I bet you probably work a lot of days a month, probably 28, 30 days a month.
I know where you're going with that. I work 12 days a month.
Okay. All right. I was just checking.
It's very strange. It's a regular schedule. I don't have a lot of free time.
Wears you out.
It does wear me out.
Yeah. That's well, good. I appreciate you taking time today. I mean, with that schedule coming in and spending time with us, I don't know how you fit it in.
I don't know. I did it either.
I mean, dude, let's get him some coffee on the. We probably need to wrap this up. He probably has to fly a package somewhere.
Yeah, we do. I bet that is a big change up from 320 days a year to now flying with FedEx. It says to feel like you're retired already.
It's different. You know, I don't miss the I miss flying the F-18, but I don't miss all the other stuff that went along with it.
The 2-hour pre-brief, the debrief.
And FedEx gives me the ability to do all the other stupid hobbies that I like to do.
And that's one thing about being in the airline industry at any level, since you do have that work schedule that allows you to use that business degree that you worked on, allows you to do other hobbies and spend more time with your wife and family and raise the family. I always tell them it's generational wealth that you're building because time with your family is the stuff you can't get back.
Yeah.
That is true.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you for spending time with us today, Chris. Thank you so much for being with us. I could talk to you all day, but I know you're busy. Thanks for spending time with us here at Aviation.
Absolutely. Glad to be here, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Should we go flying?